Today, we are welcoming back a guest who joined us all the way back in season one. And our listeners have been asking for part two ever since. In June of 2021, Ned Johnson sat down with us to talk about test prep, stress reduction, and what it really means to prepare our kids for adulthood. The conversation was one of our most popular episodes. Ned is the founder of PrepMatters, which is a tutoring and test prep company based in Washington, D.C., or at least the Washington, D.C. area. But Ned is far more than a test prep expert. He's a best-selling author, speaker, parent coach, and one of the clearest voices in the country on the science of motivation, stress, and raising kids who can, I wrote drive their own lives, but maybe like kind of own their own lives. We'll let you can Ned tell us what we're supposed to be doing with our children. He's also the father of two. He brings that lived experience into everything he writes and teaches. Ned has co-authored several books with clinical neuropsychologist Dr. William Stixrud. Did I get that right? Okay, awesome. I think you guys have co-authored three books
hmm
together.
hmm
You've got a one called The Self-Driven Child. Then you had one called What Do You Say? And the newest release is called The Seven Principles for Raising a Self-Driven Child. And then, interestingly, Ned has started his own podcast called the Self-Driven Child Podcast. He's interviewed some great guests on there, so I encourage our listeners to go check that out. And he continues to lead Prep Matters. I guess, Ned, you do it all. You have helped thousands of students over the past many years. We won't talk about how many. Anyways, Ned, it is so great to have you back. I think the world and parenting and all the good things have changed a little bit since 2021. So, can you maybe reintroduce yourself to the audience? Tell us what you've been up to and what's on your mind.
Well, thanks so much. It's really great to be back with you, Erlen and company. So I continue to spend my time working with teens mostly. I am a test prep geek, as you know, so I've spent 30 plus years and way too many hours with 16 and 17-year-olds. I'm sort of the Dick Clark of test prep, so I'll forever be on the bandstand there. Like you, I'm seeing the same kind of things. Some of the things that are, apart from continued anxiety and kids struggling with motivation, either, dysregulate either too much or too little. One of the things that I think all of us who are parents or educators are trying to wrap our brains around is really what is the long tail of COVID? Um, and for me, we tend to think about this most of what did it disrupt, not really in learning, but in the opportunities that kids need, sort of as liminal stages of developing autonomy. So if, during adolescence, if you have this decrease in dopamine and this uptick in novelty seeking, and you're supposed to go out and meet people outside of your home because you can't live with your parents for the rest of your life, at least that's no one's plan. And that happened during COVID. And you were told, no, stay home, stay home, stay home. It's a little bit like having a bird in a nest. It was not ready to take flight. And you push it down and push it down and push it down and push it down. And at some point it goes, okay. And so my wife, who teaches school here in DC, she and her colleagues keep noting these kids seem like, and you hear this all over the place. They seem like the ninth graders are like seventh graders, the 11th graders like ninth graders, and trying to figure out what that is all about. And so people are always talking about the learning loss, and I think, and we think more about the missed opportunities for wiring brains for stress tolerance, aka resilience, and for the motivation that they need to be able to run their lives and go out and do the things that are important part of life, even taking those risks by which they develop. So it's tricky, right? And as Lisa DeMore would say, COVID was really a two, or depending where you live, a 3-year experience of avoidance. And if you avoid over and over and over, that kind of becomes your default setting. And that's hard, and that's what all of you as clinicians try to do with your CBT to get people to be a little less avoidant so they can run the lives that they want.
What do you see that kids are missing right now that they're not having an
Well, their
opportunity?
phones, because they've taken them away from in school, and they're unhappy about that. I mean, I think the long trend has been that parents, out of abundance of love and concern and sometimes fear for their kids, keep depriving them of opportunities. We've sort of made to want we've had this tendency to prioritize safety over everything else. And if there's a slightest bit of safety, we can't take that risk. Well, from my perspective, life is risky, right? I'm sitting here in my office in downtown Bethesda, right outside of Washington, D.C. For all I know, right now, it'll be a very short podcast. There is a plane about to crash and crush me, and that'll be the end of me. I mean, we want to make, we have this tendency to want to make everything in life so safe. And you as clinicians, you know this with trigger warnings and all these kind of things. Our obligation, our job as parents is not to protect kids against every possible threat. When they're little and they're defenseless, yes, it is. But as they get older and older, particularly into teenage years, our efforts have to shift from how do I keep my kids safe to how do I help them learn to keep themselves safe? I mean, I've got a 22 and a 24-year-old. My kid now lives in New York City. It's a different world than where he grew up. He has to pay attention because guess what? I am not going to go Tom Cruise Mission Incredible and drop from the ceiling on a zip line to extricate him if he's in a tricky situation. He has to pay attention to maybe not getting into those or knowing what he does if he gets into those situations himself. So I see just we have all this, why can't kids, why can't kids, why can't kids? Well, I don't know too many kids who raise themselves or who designed the world in which they grew up. And so I think we adults need to be a little bit more tolerant of risk and our own discomfort, lest we deprive kids of the experience they need to develop their own tolerance for stress and discomfort. Because if you're going to push yourself socially, academically, athletically, anyway, you have to have a tolerance for stress and the sense that I can bounce back from that if things don't go my way. It's easy for me to say that. It's harder for people to live that, and I get that.
I feel like I have that conversation with my particularly difficult teens, the difference between smart, stupid, and being stupid, stupid, and what that actually looks like.
That's part of your
Can
clinical
we talk
training.
through that, Eve?
I
What does
love
that mean?
that.
You said it better, so I'm learning.
Oh, I
I
love
really
that.
do. You know, phones, cars,
E-bikes.
parties, all of these things, e-bikes, absolutely. All of these things. I mean, I think that there's just almost a level of terror in parents now who have teenagers. And I think that, it's their avoidance, it's parents avoidant of those dangerous things that wants to tie children down, which you're saying is counterproductive. It interferes with the development of independence, autonomy, responsibility, and respect. And so, how do we help parents deal with their anxiety? How do we help them deal with
Hmm.
their terror? I say all the time, probably one of the scariest thing I did was walking out of one of my daughter's dorm room when we dropped her off in Virginia and going back home. And I was like, that's it.
Oh yeah, I love that point. My son started college in fall of 2020, so this started COVID, right? So we drop him off this beautiful leafy place up in Vermont. We can't go up into his room, can't go to his dorm. We're just stuck there at the curb. He packs all the stuff up back and forth and back and forth. We give him a big hug. We're driving away. My wife is in tears, and so I am too. And she says, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Well," she said, "this is the end of his childhood," and she was right. But the thing that stuck for me was that night, every fiber of my being, I wanted to call him up and say, "How are you doing? How are you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing?" And I really had to pause and think, am I reaching out to him to make sure that he's okay or to make me feel better? And I said, I'm 100%, maybe 99% doing this to make me feel better because he has a cell phone. He knows how to use it. If he needs help, he can call us up. And if I had reached out to see that he was okay to make me feel better, I would unintentionally be giving him this message that I'm so worried about you. And so when all this kind of, military industrial safety complex, I worry so much that we say, well, we need to keep kids safe, keep kids safe. I've got to keep you safe. We've got to keep you safe. If someone can please tell me, how do I convey to a kid that I'm tracking you or taking your cell phone or checking your grades or, reaching out to parents or serving whatever? How can I tell a kid that I'm doing this to keep them safe without also conveying to them, you should be afraid of this person. You should be afraid of that situation. You should be afraid, and this drip feed message of all of these things, all these people, all these situations that you can't handle. So I've got to jump in and do it for you. And then we're surprised the kids are anxious. And I get it. Did you guys know Lenore Skenazy, Free Range Kids?
Hmm.
So in the Let Grow program, I just adore her. First of all, she is like shoot your coffee out your nose kind of funny. I mean, just hilarious. And she got most well known for writing an article about what she lives in New York City, and she and her husband, their 9-year-old, asked whether he could go on the subway by himself. And they worked out this whole plan, and yeah, yeah, yeah. And so she said, "I'm the worst mom in America." NPR, CNN, Fox News, everyone had me like, "How could you know that's the worst person ever?" And for people who don't live in New York City, the idea of like you've put a 9-year-old on the subway by himself is a little bit like you've coated him in steak juice and put him in front of a pack of wolves. But of course, two things. One, this kid had had 9 years of being on the subway with mom. He had done this roughly a gazillion times. And two, these parents felt that the subway wasn't scary, where the neighborhoods where they weren't scary because they lived there. But if you live in, Kansas, where my wife is from, or rural, New York, where I was from, the idea of New York City is like, again, terrifying. And so much of the work that we have to do as parents is to be less anxious ourselves, lest we unintentionally convey to our kids that the whole bloody world is scary when it's not true. Parts of the world are scary, but parts of it are, it's a little intense, but it's not really life-threatening. And so this is what I see over and over. We protect kids against ever getting a bad grade or getting their feelings hurt. It's just, and again, I love Lisa DeMore. She said, our job is not to protect our kids from having hard feelings or hard things happen to them. It's to support them when they do happen, right? Because adversity plus support, this is the recipe for developing resilience. Adversity without, that's neglect, but adversity with constantly saving kids, that's how you make a kid who's dependent on everyone else. And that's a really terrible thing to do to anyone's kid.
I'm curious on your thoughts of Life 360. My kids aren't old enough. And as you were talking about anxiety, and I hear my teens, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so anxious," or if I turn it off or turn it on, it's just I don't know. I have thoughts, but I'm very interested in what you think about Life 360 and if you're seeing any correlations of what's happening there.
Well, it probably depends whose data you look at. I'm sure the Life 360 people would have. So, okay, so true confession, I have never put any tracking things on my kids' phones. I've never tracked them. I've never looked at their texts. I've never checked on their cell phones. I've never looked at their grades online. I would get all the emails from Katie's grades are up. Great. I'm not looking. You know what? Why? They're not my grades. If she wants to share them, happy to talk with her about them. I'm an educator. I can have that conversation all day long, but it's not my grades, right? It's because it's not my life. It's her life. So the Life 360, I think it's probably nuanced. I certainly know kids who like to have it so that in a crisis, their parents can know where they are. But one of the challenges I think happens is if you have this idea that your parents can know where you are down to the meter, it may actually encourage kids to take more risks than they otherwise would. Certainly, kids whose parents are overly controlling, they just leave their cell phones at Early's house and then they go out wherever the heck they're going. And so one, their parents don't know where they are. And two, if they actually then needed that as a tool to reach their parents, like, oh my gosh, Dad, I'm in trouble. Well, now I don't have my phone with me. So from my perspective, I'd say no. I'd say no. I'd say no. I'd say no. Um, and I'm thinking about a colleague here who is this brilliant, brilliant guy, my education director, and he talked about as a Boy Scout, as an Eagle Scout, you would have this thing where you'd have to spend a night out overnight by yourself in the woods. That's a lot to do. They would have the dads like in a ring around them, like I don't know, a 3 mile radius or something. So these kids couldn't really wander off into the great beyond and never, but they spent the whole night by themselves. And now we've deprived all these, well, the hero's journey, right? I mean, you don't slay a dragon with your dad on the cell phone giving you instructions, your mom in there with you saying, sweetheart, now we're going to singe those clothes really badly. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Look, I mean, I love my kids as much as anyone loves their kids. And do I get nervous? Sure I do. Sure I do. But there's this great, anyone ever see the movie Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children? So if you remember this, there are these terrible monsters and they're killing children. And there's all these kids with like superpowers. And this one boy happens on the scene and he's not super strong or super fast or super anything. But the only thing is he can see the monsters that are invisible to everyone else. And at the very end of, and which is sort of where parents are, they can see those problems, right? But it's not their monster to
Hmm.
slay. And at the end of it, the protagonist turns to his friend and he said, I'm so sorry I couldn't keep you safe. And she looked at him, she said, you did something so much more powerful. You allowed us to feel brave because she could point out, here's the thing. And then they went at it and they slayed their own beasts, right? And this is what, we talk about this in the Self-Driven Child of all the work with Steve Mayer and learned helplessness. And the flip of it is not that these animals learned to be helpless, but they failed to ever learn a sense of control. And so, when the profound challenge that we have is that we deprive kids of opportunities to slay their own dragons. The science on that was simply that an adverse experience where I feel a sense of control, I develop emotional resilience that, at least in rodents, a single adverse experience in adolescence seems to inoculate them against the effects of stress for the rest of their lives. When Bill and I talked with Dr. Mayor about this, I said, so let me just get this right. I mean, based on that, would you suggest that we like, I don't know, administer mild electric shocks to teens? And he leaned back and he said, it's a very intriguing thought. And I'm sure the ERB would, we probably, his IRB would not approve of this. But we have this tendency as parents to protect kids from natural consequences and then inflict upon them logical consequences. And then we're sort of surprised they don't take away the lessons that we want them to take away. Real life is a heck of a teacher. And when we stand in front of lessons that the world has to teach our children,
It
they
just
don't,
robs them of that
yeah,
independence.
yeah. And the brain, because I mean, look, we talked about this, but probably on the first episode, my day job is helping kids do well on tests and well in school to get into college, blah, 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 blah. But I would submit, and I'll stand on the side of the road here with a sandwich board, that the most important outcome of high school and adolescence is not where do you go to college. It's developing the brain that you carry into college if you go to college or work or military or whatever. It's carrying the brain, creating the brain, sculpting the brain that you'll carry into adulthood. And we see so many kids who struggle with intrinsic motivation. They struggle with anxiety, depression, substance use disorder, cut-ins, all of these things. They're maladaptive responses when you feel a low sense of control. I stumbled on this one, by the way. This was an NIH that, let me get this right. Dysregulation in intrinsic motivation is a transdiagnostic facet of psychiatric symptomology. Real people words. When you don't have intrinsic motivation, it shows up in every bad thing you don't want for your kids. So, yeah, you're exactly right. When we deprive them of the opportunities to develop their independence, it's really a disservice to kids.
I'm still
And the
processing that
question,
one.
Yeah, sure. That's a lot
that
to
was
That was a
process.
mouthful,
It's a lot
but
of
it was
words.
very good. I
Yeah.
love
Matthew's
it.
already
so Ned,
processed. He's ready to
parents,
go.
All right.
yeah, no, Ned, parents hear that and they say, all right, Ned, so how do we develop intrinsic motivation? Like, what's the recipe?
Mm,
What's the shortcut? The answer is
I
there's not a shortcut,
There
but I
is a
want to hear
recipe
you.
though.
Yeah.
What's the
You're
recipe?
right.
Spill the tea.
Yeah, there's not a shortcut to it, but because it's lived experience, right? So our North Star is what's called self-determination theory. And it's created by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan back in the 80s. And it's not only one of the most explored models in the psychology of motivation, but really in all of psychology, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies. And it holds the three psychological needs that need to be met: a sense of competence, sense of relatedness, a sense of autonomy. So you need to feel, competent, connected to people, and autonomy. Of the three of these, autonomy is the most important. We actually asked Dr. Deci about this, and he said, hands down, that's the one that's most important, in part because children have way more autonomy, typically in kindergarten, than they do when they're in high school. And what happens is when we as parents jump in to save the day, to tell them to do their homework and da 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 da, we can, while we may be making kids be more competent at doing their math or practicing the violin or whatever, we can undermine all three psychological senses of being competent, related, and autonomous. So, what does that look like? Well, sweetheart, we'll get you a Kumon tutor. Well, da 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 da. Well, I'm probably better at math, but unless you're really deft about this, it can make me feel like I'm less competent because my mom is making me go and do all this extra math tutoring. We're not just sitting around playing board games. She's on me all the time about get those grades up, work on your homework, da da da, which is not great for relationships. And certainly, it's not autonomously driven, right? I mean, what kids need more than anything else in the world, sleep, love, and time to play. But we don't do that, right? I mean, I talked to all these schools. I was at a lovely school in Atlanta, and One of the teachers there was saying, well, the parents here all want more homework for their kids. And I said, well, I said, if I may, what grade are you in? Or what grade do you teach? She says, I teach kindergarten. And I said, you know that homework doesn't contribute at all to learning in elementary school, right? She said, I do. And she said, well, I said, what's up with his parents? Well, their friends' kids are getting homework and did it. I said, okay, that makes sense. I said, respectfully, you know things that those parents don't know. You've had a lot more kids go through this process. This is their first kindergarten. And so they're just worried. But because you know things that they don't know, part of your job is to make them help them feel that it's safe, not to fight with the kids all the time about homework, because it contributes nothing to learning and contributes so negatively to relationships and intrinsic motivation. So we increase the so so let me back up. Um, so self-determination through intrinsic motivation, this is really the thing that we're aiming for. And I would add to this, in addition to play, there's a wonderful researcher who we talk about in The Self-Driven Child, a guy named Reed Larson, who in the 90s was studying how is it that teens, adolescents become intrinsically motivated. And he found it was not by dutifully doing their homework. It was by what he described as the passionate pursuit of pastimes. So whether that's, trying to learn to throw a curveball, right? It's sports, it's art. I didn't do it the right. I'm going to draw it again, right? Music, coding, baking, small engine repair, fishing, anything where you're working harder and harder to get really good at something that matters to you. Because if it matters to you, you will push yourself through the frustration. Darn it, it didn't work again, right? A kid who's playing Legos and he's done it to the sky and it falls over. What does he do? Chances are he doesn't scoop it up, put it in a bag, and put it for sale at a tag sale. He's like, darn it. He stomps around the house. He's mad at everyone for 45 minutes or maybe for 3 days. And then he goes back and does it again because he wants the darn thing to work out. And so I think about, I mean, most of my work is in high school, but you see this even at the youngest possible age where we pull away from children play and then we put them into organized activities. There is a place for organized activities, but by definition, play is not adult directed. So this is my full court case for the better part from my perspective, Jonathan Haidt's book. The first half I'm more down with, where we need to return play to childhood. If we want a better outcome, we have to if we want better outputs, we need better inputs. And play would be a big part of that.
And play is a child's language. You
Hmm.
learn so much by just watching them. They'll share so much with you because they don't have the words.
It's such a good point. Yeah, Bill was talking about this. Bill's my writing partner is 76, so he's got this gaggle of grandkids running all over the place, and these two girls, and they're cute as buttons. And they got into the dentist, and going to the dentist, it's kind of intense, right? And they came home and they played dentist. Now you be the dentist and I'll be the patient. Then we'll flip, right? And as you know, Eva, I mean, this is for because they don't have language. This is how they process things. And
Hmm.
instead, we put them in lines with little jerseys and some grown up like me with a whistle yelling at them to go do a drill. That's not play.
Mm-mm.
So Bill, Ned, Ned, play for adolescents. What's that look like?
That's a complicated thing. I mean, my perspective on this is that extracurricular activities used to be a great source of stress relief for kids, a great way for them to feel their competence. Maybe they're not that academic, but they're great, and the cheer team are great as, field hockey players or whatever it happened to be. And they could show up in other places where maybe they found it harder to shine in school. But all those things now have also been, from my perspective, monetized, weaponized, and professionalized, all in the pursuit of where you get into college.
Yeah.
So for me, I am always trying to encourage kids. What are they interested in? And they're thinking, but does it look good for college? With all due respect, I don't give a fig whether it looks good for college. Does it matter? Does it matter to you? And I think we really have to work hard, particularly as parents, but for young people themselves to think, what am I doing that I'm doing for me versus doing for someone else? There's a really nice local school here that they're actually featured in the folk life festival, this thing called the Museum of the Contemporary American Teen. And last year they had a big clap back against Jonathan Haidt, saying it's not all about the phones, the stress that we feel. So I went in and spent a whole day, sat in on 8 classes, talked to all these kids. It was amazing. This one girl said, for my friends and me, we think about every moment of our day through the lens of what would a college admissions person think about how we're spending our time? You think about the extrinsic motivation, the externalized locus of control. How could you not be anxious if you're thinking all the time, how would other people think about me? How are other people judging every moment of my day? So it's challenging, right? Because kids want to go to highly selective, I call them highly rejective universities. I get that. But for me, I try to take interest in what kids are interested in. And in some ways, I could give a fig. If they want to tell me about winning or getting an award, great. But what's the most fun part about that? What do you enjoy most about that? And that can even be video games. What's the most, and actually take an interest in the things that are interesting to kids, not for is it cool for someone else or is it great for college? Because we have to normalize that language and that way of thinking that you're allowed to do things just because you think they're fun, right? I'm obviously not going to college. I do things that I think are fun,
Where do you
right?
think that messaging is coming from when she talks about like that's the lens that I think about? Like that makes me sad to hear that.
It made her sad to say it. I mean, it's all over the place, and these are cultural values. I mean, particularly, I have a friend named Stuart Slavin. He's got a new book coming out called The Success Trap. It's coming out in August, and he's a pediatrician by training, a medical education educator by profession. And he started at St. Louis Medical College, but he's interviewed like 18 college, eight kids, excuse me. He's interviewed or surveyed students at 18 high schools across the country in California and Missouri, all over Ohio, and asked them about the sources of stress in their lives. And he had like 30 different criteria and they worked up. Let me see if I can find this. The top 12 were all related to school and school pressure. I mean, it is bonkers. So pressure from self, time pressure, pressure to get into good college, pressure not to disappoint your parents, fear of failing an exam, amount of homework, amount of material I need to learn, fear of failing a course, pressure from parents about grades, fear of not getting all A's, not enough time to spend with my friends, and pressure to keep up with peers. And so there's a Catherine Morton, I have the third part to her name, but a writer for the New York Times had a great piece about um, kids are helicoptering themselves. And that's the beautiful thing the, about culture is once you set it up, it's self-sustaining. And now, of course, and Eve, you probably know this better than I because I'm an old fart, obviously, that we now have parents who grew up in this pressure cooker and they don't know any other way. This is
Mm.
what they experience as children. And so they think this is the way the world has always been. And this is the way it has to be. And look, I help people get into college, and I am not at all opposed to people wanting to go to, my words, highly rejective colleges. There's no problem with that. But most mental health, as you know, is changing thinking from I have to I want to. And it's
Mm.
simply can I don't know what any of you, I assume you guys went to college. I don't know. I didn't look up your LinkedIn or CV. I don't know. Do I care when to college? Not really. I mean, if you want to tell me, I'm happy to hear all about it. But I really don't care because in the real world, it doesn't matter. In the adult world, I should say, at least it doesn't matter. So I think I mean, Jeff Salingo, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people who are really working on this. But I think at this point, we've started up and the flywheel just keeps on turning. And
So it
it's
kind
going
of
to take
goes
a lot of
back
effort.
to parental anxiety and projection. All right, guys, we're the problem. Let's just go ahead and admit it.
Well, I mean, to let parents off the hook, certainly it's the case that some people have more advantages. All the research, Paul Kruger and Stacy Bergdale about, where you go to college doesn't make a difference. Simply put, particularly if you're white, well-to-do and male, doesn't matter. You already have all the connections you need. Doesn't matter. If you want to become a billionaire, you should probably go to Stanford or Harvard. But anything in between that, not so much, right? For kids or families who are low SES, particularly if they're a minority, going to a more selective college does make a difference because they find their way into a different culture and those connections. But for so many of the families who are driving themselves insane, they already have all the connections. They could literally just sit back and enjoy themselves a little more than they do. And so it's hard. But from my perspective, I mean, again, I don't want to blame parents for worrying about their kids' futures. As loving parents, you're wired to want to protect your kids and to help them have great lives. I get it. It's just that it's not obvious to parents that a lot of what they're doing is actually counterintuitive to that because you can have kids who achieve everything, but now they've developed anxiety and depression because they don't have the brains, they don't have a motivational system that's sustainable. If it's extrinsically driven, it's not sustainable. And then they get into, Yale, where 60% of kids are anxious or depressed. So they achieve everything in the world, but they can't be happy because you really can't be happy when you're depressed. Those things don't go together. And for what it's worth, depression has no respect for academic success, career success, financial success. So I want kids to be as successful as they want to be, but I want them to have brains that they can enjoy that. I love my life. Would I be happier if I had $1 billion in my bank account? Oh, I can think of some really fun things to do with $1 billion, but I don't have any evidence that suggests that my life would be meaningfully better or happier if I had $1 billion in the bank. But if someone wants to give me and just for an experiment, let us try. I'm happy to take that on. Just we can do a whole experiment.
Okay, so you're open
Right.
to that idea. Okay, noted.
I can be pretty happy, I
Right.
think.
Yeah. The
Can
Ned's
I?
funny. The Ned Johnson was the founder of Fidelity, and everybody's like, "Oh, are you that?" No, I'm not that Ned Johnson. I'm a different guy.
That's so great. If okay, so if I'm a parent listening and I heard you say kids need sleep, love, and time to play, I love that. And then Matthew asked, okay, so what does play look like for adolescents? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what gives my kid passion and like something that matters to them? But you don't really know my kid because if I am not on them 24/7, they are going to just play video games and they are going to get on YouTube and, all this technology that we know, as Eve likes to say, we're never going to outsmart the Apple engineers and designed to hijack our attention. So, okay, if I get my anxiety under control, it's not a fair statement. If I, as a parent, can get my anxiety and I'm willing to struggle myself and watch my kid be uncomfortable. And I buy into what you're saying that, okay, maybe we don't have to, everything doesn't need to be extracurriculars, don't need to be weaponized, and let's find some joy here. What can I do to help my kid find some things that they are passionate about and direct them away from 2026 distractions of Apple engineers and tech and social media and all the good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So I mean, I hear sort of three things. No, it's great. I mean, the problem is I don't want to give a 25-minute answer to a really good
No, no,
question.
no.
So
Every listener is
yeah,
like, that's what he
right,
does. He asks three
right.
questions in one question.
Just
So,
pick one.
so I hear in there, how to help kids manage technology. How do parents help their kids when they're struggling in behaviors you think are not good? Um, and three, how do we and then how do we as parents kind of handle our own anxiety around that? In addition to worrying about the brilliance of Apple engineers, please remind yourself as a parent, you will never win a game of technology with your kids. You're not going to outsmart them because you're not spending all of your time figuring out how to, you can read every blog in the world, but trust me, kids are spending all their time figuring out around those controls. Respectfully, my perspective on this is that, particularly for adolescents, we cannot have our energy be how do we control our kids' use of technology? Our energy has to be how do we help our kids control for themselves their use of technology? Because unless you're going to be a full Luddite, I mean, if you're Amish or you're Mennonite, okay, let's have this conversation. But all the rest of us are going to have lives that involve technology. And so we have to figure out how do we help our kids learn to manage that technology for themselves, understanding that there are real downsides to technology, but also they connect with friends, particularly if they are diverse in somewhere. They're finding their people that way. They can go down a rabbit hole of exploration and investigation. They can connect with their friends on the phone. I mean, my kid graduated in COVID in 2020, and in March 20th or whatever the heck it was, he said, "Dad, do you think I can get an Xbox?" He's a senior in high school. And I said, "An Xbox? Hmm. The start of a global pandemic virus. I think this is an excellent time to get an Xbox, right?" And it was the only way that he connected with his friends for like the next 2 years because it wasn't safe to go anywhere. And so it's tricky because do I want anyone's kid to be on video games or a phone 4, 6, 8 hours a day? No. But are there ways that they're really valuable, that this is how they connect with their friends? 100%. So, a few things to begin with. If your kid doesn't have a passion, please don't worry about it yet. Because you never know. Right around the corner, they meet some kid who's really cool, someone who they think is cute, they want to impress, a great teacher, a great professor. You never know when that light switch gets turned on. And when you start to press kids, well, you've got to find your passion, got to find, or they start doing a thing a little bit and you smother them with it, you extinguish the flame. So please just be patient with yourself, be patient with your kid, particularly if you've got a kid who's ADHD, because they're probably 2 or 3 years behind other kids, particularly the girls who seem like they've got it all together because they do, their brains are more developed. So just try to be patient. Again, Bill Stixrud said, the most helpful thing that I've ever learned about brains is how slow to develop is the prefrontal cortex. We know cognitive functions 25 ±3, +3 boys, -3 girls. The emotional functions of it, age 32. So I have an ADHD kid who we won't have to go on all of his video game stuff, but he, when he's now in graduate school, and he said, I've decided I can't play video games at all because I'll go down a rabbit hole and I need that time for composition. And so it's just in a closet. And my wife and I were never hammered him on this. So I'll tell this example about Matthew. Maybe this will provide people with a little bit of a roadmap. First of all, if your kid is playing a lot of video games, ask him, what's the best about it? Is this what everyone else is playing? What's the hardest part? Is there something at this you're better at than other people? How do you know when you've won? What makes you good? Whatever. You would take an interest in their baseball or their or artwork, take an interest in their video games as well, because it gives you the opportunity to have influence. And you only get that by authentic interest, not by power. Then recognize that if your kid is playing video games like 8 million hours a week, they're probably enjoying it. And they too come away with a queasy feeling of, because they know it. They've got human brains. So here's the story from my son. This is in the book, our second book, What Do You Say? He had a day off of school. He's a musician, he's a composer. On Thursday, he's like, I get a day off school tomorrow. I'm like, what are you doing with that? I hope he was going to say, I'm going to learn a song with her. He's like, play Xbox. No, play Fortnite. I'm like, awesome. Great. By the way, if you can avoid any game, it's probably Fortnite because it's like the casino of video games. So anything else is probably better. I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, so I come home on Friday afternoon. There's my kid at 6 o'clock sitting there, still playing there, blowing things up, having a whale of a good time. Mind you, in his pajamas. Pajamas. He's still in pajamas. And I'm like, how you doing? I said, can you finish, hurry, win, lose? I don't really care. Because remember, we were going to go out for pizza. Oh, yeah, I'll do that. And can you get dressed? Sure. Fortunately, my son he's more easygoing than his dad. I bite my tongue. I was mad. And we go out to dinner. I calm down. We have a nice enough pizza. I say nothing more. Saturday managed to say nothing more. Sunday say nothing until 5 o'clock, which maybe you had this experience, either seen it or done it. 5 o'clock. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm all this work. I can't believe I wasted my whole day on Friday. I'm such an idiot? Why didn't I do? If ever there was served up on a platter an opportunity for parental, I told you so, this was it. But Bill and I were in the middle of writing this book called What Do You Say? So I bit my tongue. So I said, I'm so sorry. I know what that feels like. I've been there before. I get how frustrating that is. Can I ask a question or two? Sure. How many hours do you think you spent playing Fortnite? 8, 9, 10? Wow. Was it fun? Oh, yeah, it was really fun. We blah, 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 blah. Can I ask another question? Sure. How many hours do you think you would have needed to play to get your Fortnite fix? I don't know, maybe 5? Last question. In the future, would it be helpful if mom or I kind of tried to be your, technology consultant to help you manage that? So you can still play and get to hang out with your friends, but you don't feel like you've wasted your whole day. Yeah, that'd be really good. Because he was a sophomore. He's ADHD. I know all the science on this stuff. I'm as concerned about screen time as anyone else. But I also know that he was 2 years away from going off to college with hopes, dreams, and a suitcase full of our money. And I'd have no control at all over how he uses technology. So I wanted him to struggle. And the key thing to this, I think, and this is important, is when your kid voices whatever, whatever, emotionally, you have to take their side. Well, if you'd only done such and such, right? If this comes out of like motivational interview, you have a problem drinker, and the next day, well, if you wouldn't drink so much, go pound sand, Ned. Ned, I know that. Emotionally take their side because that's where you get the buy-in and be able to step through the door and move in the direction of what, we describe as being a consultant to your kids. I'm not sure I fully answered the question, but that's kind of one
No,
slice
that
of
was
it.
great. And you brought it back to because that's what you talked about, I think, in the self-driven child, right? That our ideal role is consultant, not
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where
You
does
bring
the
up
play stupid games, win stupid prizes fall on that? Is that a no on a parent response? Is that rage bait?
Ask that again.
Play play stupid games, win stupid prizes as a parental response. Is that the rage bait bucket? Is that we just don't say that, asking for early?
If you say
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
if you say that
Thanks,
to your kid,
thanks, Eve.
yeah, yeah.
Because I
So
would never.
yeah, so listen,
Mm-mm.
so you guys have, you've had David Yeager in, right? And I love his book. And the basic gist of this is that teens, what does he say? Teens require status and respect the way toddlers need sleep and food. And so it may be that they're getting, and they're getting, the video games, that's where they're getting respect, right? They want to win, right? This is how they connect. If they don't even play the game, they can't have conversation about what's going on, right? And that might be the status and respect but with parents, if we don't treat them respectfully, and we maintain that all children, not well-achieving children, not neurotypical children, all children have brains in their heads and they want their lives to work out. Will they do stupid things? Yes, they will. They're human. Will they do childish things? They're children. Kind of goes with the territory, right? If we want kids to learn from bad choices, if we pound them on that, they will figure out a way to blame us and they will deflect and avoid, emotionally take their side. And the last thing I wanted to say that came back to me earlier, you're asking about, kids on this, and I have to be on them 24/7. Jonathan Haidt makes the point that the use of phones has been the cause of all this anxiety. And he admits that there's an enormous correlation, 100%. He makes the case, and a pretty compelling one, that there's some real causation there too. But here's the other thing. It is just as plausible that the anxiety came first and the use of cell phones is the result. Because we know at the same time that kids are on their phones more, they're drinking less, they're using drugs less, they're having sex less, they're driving less. And it is possible that the cell phones are just the most perfectly designed avoidance tool that has ever been created. So we have all these children who are anxious and they use cell phones to escape their problems. And so if I am on a kid 24/7, very likely becoming another source of stress for them. Certainly not stress relief for them because we don't have a happy connection now. And we know that the most powerful protective factor against the effects of stress on developing young minds is a close connection that a kid has with a parent or another caregiver. So respectfully, and I understand the fears that loving parents have. I do. But if you're putting all of your energy into policing the technology unintentionally, you are vacating the role of that close connection that your children not only deserve but desperately need. So I know this technology stuff is hard. I will say that we have an entire chapter in our book, What Do You Say, about talking with kids, the hard ones, talking with kids about sleep and technology. And we look at pornography and social media and gaming, all of it, knowing that this is really hard for all of us. But I'll leave with the last point on the technology. Lisa D'Amour, whose work I just adore, she says, our efforts cannot be on how do we control kids' use of technology. It has to be parents with kids, parents and kids together against the technologists at Apple or wherever it happens to be. And it's true for every challenge that a kid's going to face. If he's got a bad relationship, right? If he's struggling with a teacher, if he's got anxiety, right? If it's substance use, if cutting, if all these things, if you work on the problem, remember that problem, that's the symptom. That's the symptom, And if you think cell phone addiction is bad, you want to try them, take up hard drugs. Let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's recognize that these things are by design addictive, but it's also how kids connect with everyone and everything. So we want to help them get the best out of technology without it having to be the worst for them.
Amen.
Um, I'm looking at the time and I was thinking about what Ned said before we started because like, oh, I've got this outline and we're gonna just easily cover all this. And you said if we got to half, I think we'd be doing good. So maybe it's going to have to be part three. I wanted to just brief, can you kind of, we haven't really talked about your newest book, Seven Principles. What are the
Yeah.
top takeaways there from parents? And then I wanted to, if we have a couple minutes, do some real life scenarios because that is an absolute Eve and audience favorite.
Yeah. So my favorite part of the book, the Seven Principles for Raising the Self-Driven Child, is the introduction. In it, we describe when the self-driven child first came out. Bill and I were lecturing all over the country, but like all over the place in the Washington, D.C. area. And at some point, Bill recognized this mom. She was actually a client from years ago, and she was like at talk after talk after talk after talk. And Bill sort of made his way up to her and says, "It's so great to see you, but I got to ask you, why do you keep coming here? I mean, it's kind of the same talk every time. It's kind of the same jokes I use every time. Like, why?" And she said, "Bill, when I listen to you and Ned, it all makes sense. And I just feel so much more right about the world and how I interact with my kid. And then I go home and he's done something so stupid, right? Or I talk to someone else, and they're all spun up and I get spun up and I fall right back into these patterns." And so we wrote this book because people can listen to your podcast and say, that is such a good idea. And then we're homeostatic and go back to doing the same thing or read a book or whatever it happens to be. And so the point of this book is a whole bunch of exercises to make these practices your practice, right? So the reflections, the exercise, there are all kinds of things in there. And you can do them all at once. You can do them in pieces to try to just routinize these things so it becomes more your pattern. This is much easier for me because I talk about the things that we think are valuable ad nauseum. So they're just wired into my brain. But anything can get wired into people's brains. So, we have seven principles in here. So the first one is put connection first. And I talked about that. I would say that this came out of conversations with teens where we asked them, who do you feel closest to in the world? And sometimes my mom, she's so great, my dad, but maybe my older brother, a cousin, pastor, a coach, a tutor, whatever. And ask them, well, what is it about them that makes you feel close to them? And we got there's a whole several dozen high school kids, and all the answers fell into one of two buckets. Either they just listen to me without judging me, and or they don't tell me what to do all the time. And teens can make decisions that are just as good as adults can, cognitively they can. What they lack is as much experience and as much knowledge. They don't know as much, but they can make really good decisions. And so when we treat kids respectfully, they can make good decisions and then offer up, suggestions and I got an idea, can I run it by you? So we then go on, connection, the power, the language of a parent consultant, of a non-anxious presence, how to motivate kids without trying to change them, radical downtime, a whole bunch of, the things that we think are most valuable. But the whole idea was to give people practicing this stuff so that when they've got kind of that script in their head a little bit, And when things start to get a little heated with their kid, they go, "Wait, what did I what did I write down in that experiment?" And it's sort of sock puppet, Cyrano de Bergerac idea.
That's great. Thank you. Eve, you want to do one or two real world and
All right, let's do the real world situations. Okay, the homework battle. A 10-year-old refuses to start homework every single night. It turns into a screaming match by 7 p.m. The parent has tried rewards, consequences, and timers, and nothing is working. What does the consultant, not manager approach look like in this situation?
I love this question. And it starts with the second chapter in The Self-Driven Child has the title, I love you too much to fight with you about your homework. And that's where you start. Because in part, loving parents probably have some ideas about how things can go better. In a perfect world, they like their children to listen to those lovely ideas about how things can go better. But because a low sense of control is the most stressful thing that anyone can experience, then your executive functions go completely sideways. So, as a parent, you're really stressed and you're trying to control your kid and get her to do your homework. But here's the challenge, you can't. You can't. If she refused to, she lay flat on the ground, she started screaming bloody murder. The neighbors are calling the police. What are you going to do? Can't do it. You can give her a bribe. That doesn't make her want to do the homework. She just wants the $20. Doesn't make her want the homework. So you can't make her want what she doesn't want. What I can say, though, is that most kids do not want to go to school unprepared. They don't want to feel unsuccessful in school. Chances are, if she's avoiding that homework, sorry, lights always go out on here. Chances are, if she's avoiding that homework, it's because it's hard, or it makes her feel stupid, or she's stressed. And you don't know what the answer is to that. You don't, but she does. And she's not going to tell you if you're hammering on the homework. So what you do, I know this podcast is coming out in the end of May. In May 4th, may the force be with you, right? That's my birthday, so I get that every year. Here's the deal. May the power of no force be with you. And you say to your kid, listen, sweetheart, I love you too much to fight with you about this. And honestly, I can't make you do it. What am I going to do? I'm going to duct tape the pen to your hand. I'm going to make you, I couldn't make you do this homework. But I kind of think there might be some reasons to do it. That's probably why your teacher gave it to you. If there's a way that I can help you get this stuff done, I'd love to do it. Do you want me to sit with you if you find it boring? I can quiz you on stuff. Is there anything that I can do that's helpful that doesn't make you crazy? And then you leave it alone. And if she doesn't do her homework, guess what she's going to get? Natural consequences. And she'll go to school and the teacher will be like, hey, what's going on there? And you'll probably get an email from the teacher saying she didn't do her homework for the fifth day in a row. And you, as a loving but non-anxious parent, said, you're right. We're trying something new. It's her homework. It's my job to support her, but it's not my job to make her do it because you know what? I realized I can't do that. And we see this over and over and over and over. When parents are spending 80 units of energy to get a kid to do anything, the kid spends 20. And you get more freaked out as a parent, you go to 90, and the kid goes to 10. And it doesn't change. And here's the deal 10 years old, what is that, fourth, fifth grade? What exactly, with all due respect, can you remember about fourth or fifth grade learning? Nothing. The most important thing is your relationship with your kid and her healthy brain development. And anything she doesn't learn in fourth grade, she'll have abundant opportunities to learn it later. We want to let kids, particularly if there is an undiagnosed learning disability, we want to know that. We want to have it be a hot friggin' mess and go splat all over and fail everything. So not just you and she, but the teachers go, whoa, 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 there's something going on here. And then we find the support that she needs to support as a learner because your kid wants to learn well and do well in school. But start by changing the energy and just say, I love you too much to fight with you about this. How can I help?
Let's go the opposite way with this. Let's go with a 15-year-old. So
Mm.
probably higher parental anxiety around college as well. But what about a 15-year-old kid who used to be a really strong student, but is completely disengaged? Those grades are slipping. There's no interest in activities. He's spending most of his time alone in his room, and he says he's fine. When this can be normal adolescence, when should a parent actually be concerned?
Well, I'm not the psychologist in the group, but if it's persistent, right? If it's persistent, if you see other behaviors, if you see him avoiding things, not just schoolwork, but if you see him avoiding things that used to be fun, right? This is adhedenia, which is what the lack of enjoyment that comes along with depression. And I think we should be not alarmist, but we should be really sensitive to, do we see symptoms of depression? So I would reach out to the school counselor gently, anonymously, not anonymously, on the down low, so you could just know. You say, hey, I'm seeing this at home. What are you seeing at school? Because there's a possibility that that kid is reserving his worst for mom and dad at home. And if he's really engaged in school and is doing his work there and is doing things that love it, then I don't know, he's got stuff going on and it's a phase that he's going through. But if he is disengaged everywhere and it's persistent, then we want to explore that. And so for me with kids, I always wait for when they grouse about something. And we have a tendency, well, if you put a little work in there, you get better grades. Please don't say that. Please don't say that. If they grouch about anything, say, is that something you want to be better? Because he may not care, right? But usually also when kids say they don't care, it's really it's avoidance, right? When this is stupid means it makes me feel stupid. And I'll say, as a person who, particularly as an adolescent, struggled with my own depression, and I'm because of that, I'm vulnerable to falling back into that. So when I get too tired and too stressed, I can have a bout of depression, every once in a while. And for me, it's usually expressed in responses to my wife asking me whatever she asks, and I just say, whatever, whatever. And if you hear whatever or it's fine too many times, you should, take concern, reach out to people who can help in ways that you may not have those skills yet. Because I could give a fig about kids' grades, but I worry about them if they are not doing well in school and it's bothering them. Then we want to help them have the support to at least feel like, hey, I'm doing well enough, and they're not really down on themselves and feeling bad all the time every day that they have to go to work and feel like they're failing.
It's great. Thank you. Somehow we have run up against the clock. Okay, so as we wrap up, I got to think there's some parents out there that are down on themselves and saying, "Man, I've messed this up. I've been pushing my kid too hard.
Right.
I'm not consulting. I'm managing. I'm controlling instead of connecting." I like what Ned is saying, but man, I've screwed this up. So, what encouragement would you offer? And then, what are the couple of two or three things that you want parents to remember from this conversation?
Yeah. Really quickly, one more thought about that, the boy who's disengaged. One of the most powerful medicines that we can give to young people is just to enjoy them as they are. Just enjoy them as they are. And particularly when kids aren't doing well, we as parents feel so stressed because we have everyone giving us the hairy eyeball, the teachers, the in-laws, our spouse, whatever. And believe it or not, you can enjoy your children, even when everything's a disaster. The grades are a disaster, the rooms are a disaster, the lives are a disaster. And we have this tendency to think that when kids catch up, then they'll heal up. In my experience, it always goes the other way around. They heal up and then they catch up because those executive functions come back online and they start to find problems within themselves for those problems that you've been pulling your hair out about. And one of the easiest ways we can do is just to enjoy kids as they are because they're lovable just as they are. As Mr. Rogers would say, I like you just the way you are. Right?
Love Mr. Rogers.
Um, so for parents who feel like, oh my gosh, I've been down the wrong path, it's not been working, my relationship with my kid is a disaster, what do I do now? For me, just apologize. Just apologize, particularly for an adolescent. There are few things that convey respect as much as saying, I was thinking about this way and I realized it was wrong. So you say, listen, I feel like I've been on your case for the last 18 months, just writing you about grades and schools, as though you don't also care about doing well, as though you can't figure these things out by yourself, as though you don't want to be successful and have your life work out. And golly, I've been thinking about this. I just realized I'm wrong about that. I mean, would I like to things be a little bit better? Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. Am I worried? I get worried, but You're not a dope. You want your life to work out. You have good ideas on this. And so I just want to apologize because I don't think it's been effective and I don't think it's been fair. And I'm not going to be a perfect parent because the only perfect parents are people without children. And so yeah, there we are. But I just want to apologize for treating you like, like you're not capable to do this stuff. And I'll keep trying to help, but I'm trying to move in the direction of offering you help, not acting like I'm the boss, that I know better what's good for you in your life than you do. Because this is your life. So you have to be the expert on you. I'm just here to help. Um, for takeaways, other things I want people to know, when things aren't going well for your kids, you worry. Of course you do, because you love them and you want the world for your kids. Of course you worry. But so much of the fear that we generate in our own minds is catastrophizing and fortune telling. And a kid who's struggling now, it's not the present we're worried about. Oh my gosh, her best friend broke up with her. It's the thought that she'll never have another friend like that. And it breaks your heart, right? Or it's the disaster. Oh my gosh, how he's ever going to have a successful life? Will he ever be able to live independently? Oh, and that breaks our heart. But the reality is that most kids don't get stuck when we don't get stuck. And if we just say, yeah, this sucks for now, this is part of your path. And even if that's just something internally that we tell ourselves. I mean, I think I may have shared this before. My dad was an alcoholic. Things didn't end well. My mom was institutionalized. I spent 3 months of seventh grade in a pediatric psychiatric hospital. If I present as someone who was hospitalized, please don't tell me no. I want to hold to a different vision of myself, right? But it was, if you'd put a marker on me, like who was going to be betting on me in seventh grade? Well, that's the kid who's going to end up having a life that he really loves. But kids have brains in their heads and they want their lives to work out. And when they're struggling right now, there may be reasons you understand. There may be reasons you don't understand. There may be reasons you can do things about and help with them. There may be things where like all we can do is buckle up and keep on rolling. And so some of the things that we can do, if parents can reflect for themselves, think about the worst things that you ever experienced as a young person or as an adult. And did you get through it? And are you okay or okay enough now? Chances are you are. And part of the confidence that you have in getting up every day and facing the world, as much of the disaster as you might feel it to be, is your sense that I can handle this because I have handled things in the past. And I'll leave you with this. My son, who's 24, who is a lovely, I mean, he's just the greatest kid, lovely kid. And we were going to some errand, picking up something, driving, and he's really into metacognition, thinking about his own thinking, right? And was riffing about this. And I sort of joined in. I said, one of the things, my son had a brain tumor after his first year of college. It was, we can talk about this another time. He's great now, but it was a lot. And I said, when you were going through all that, I had to, uh, I had to sort of project myself in the future and imagine what would happen to you if you died. And I had to make peace with that because I need to be dad for Katie, right? I needed to be help mom as much as she needed help. And I needed to be the best version of me for you. And he said, well, I did the same thing. I said, really? He said, yeah. And he said, I imagine what would happen if I died. I said, what did you tell yourself? And he said, I can't say this without being in tears. He said, well, if I do, I've had a wonderful life. And we know that almost all life, there's going to rain that's going to befall. And the challenge is you'd like that to be when you're 32 and have you know, a strong stock portfolio so you can weather it. But you don't know whether kids have those struggles when they're 2 or 12 or 22. You don't know. We don't get to choose. But our job is to have confidence that they will get through this with our help and their futures will be bright, even though it's really
Um,
dark right now. And that's not easy to do. But when we can do it, it makes it easier for them to do it too.
Thank you so much for sharing that story with
Yeah,
us.
I
Oh,
appreciate you being
oh,
vulnerable because
oh, God, he's a great kid.
Well, and what, validation as a parent too.
Yeah. Oh,
To
thank
just
you.
have that level of emotional safety to be able to talk about that. And then really it boils down to like, this has been a good life. I love
I'll
that.
send you guys. I have to send you guys a video. He made a song. He wrote a song when he's a music major, and he got this assignment of compose a song that a minstrel would play, or so only with instruments that you could carry on a horse. So he's a pianist. He couldn't use a piano. My wife we had this swing set in our yard. The kids outgrew it. We took it down. We put it on Craigslist and gave it to a church, a few towns over, and a bunch of kids came and picked it up and assembled it. So my wife takes a picture of this and texts it to him, and she writes, "Your childhood in pieces on the lawn," which is hilarious. So he then writes this song called "The Maple Tree on the Hill," and it's all about my parents planted this maple tree when I was, as a kid, and it grew and grew, and the plague. No, the swing set is no longer there. And the part of the refrain is, children grow up anyway. There's no way to make them stay. You just love them dearly, dearly, and maybe get teary when you hear that they're doing okay. It's unbelievable. I'll send it to you. It's adorable.
Wow,
Yeah,
I
please
love
do.
that.
That's awesome.
It's adorable.
Uh, Ned, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for gracing us with episode
Anytime.
two. You're a great storyteller. Your calm presence is really nice in these times, and I just appreciate the perspective you have for
Thank you.
us, our audience, and parents. And thanks for the great work that y'all are doing. Where can our listeners find you, follow your work, and pick up a copy of the Seven Principles for Raising a Self-Driven Child?
So those books are all over the place. That Bezos guy, if you think he needs more money, but ideally go to your local bookstore. You'll pay a couple more bucks, but you should be grateful to have a wonderful bookstore. If you're in my area, there's a place called Wonderland Books, who are appreciably wonderful. Our website is selfdrivenchild.com, and then I'm on social media, the other Ned Johnson, because the Ned Johnson was a billionaire. And I'm not. So
This
I'm
is so
I'm
great.
the other Ned Johnson on Instagram, and my TikTok is borderline unhinged. But if you want to understand ADHD, at least my take on it, you can go over there. If you like, what is wrong with that kid? I'll tell you.
It's awesome.
That's,
Thank you, Ned.
Thanks so much. It's great, Eve, Early. You're both wonderful. All of it.
All right. Eve, you got to go see your patient. Thank you
I
for
know,
staying.
I know.
You're
I
the
could
best.
stay all day. Gotta
Okay.
shift gears now.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thanks, guys.
Eve.